The congressman's daughter walked into Judge Judy's courtroom like she owned every inch of it, chin high, heels sharp, confidence louder than the truth she was hiding. For a while, she thought her last name was enough to bend the room around her. But when the evidence cornered her, when her lies cracked open in front of everyone, panic took over. And in a moment of pure desperation, she did the unthinkable. She dialed 911 on Judge Judy. 30 seconds later, she realized she had just detonated her own downfall. But before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Don't forget the subscribe button. The courtroom shifted around her, the way a room adjusts when someone walks in believing the world belongs to them. Her heels clicked against the floor like punctuation marks, crisp and confident, each step announcing her arrival as if the cameras were here for her and only her. The audience reacted first, a few murmurs, a rustle of bodies leaning forward to get a better look. Judge Judy watched without blinking. The congressman's daughter moved with practiced assurance, chin lifted, shoulders pulled back, eyes bright with the kind of confidence that grows in houses where consequences never stay long enough to matter. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, smiled again, and then almost on cue glanced toward the nearest camera. Not for documentation, for recognition. Across the room, the plaintiff stood quietly at her small wooden podium. A bakery apron, clean but worn, was folded neatly over her arm. Her fingers curled around a folder thick with papers. The edge of it dug into her palm, but she did not adjust her grip. She just held it, steady and nervous, as if the folder itself was her anchor. Judge Judy let the silence stretch long enough to make the defendant's smile feel out of place. Then she spoke, her voice level and measured. "Let us begin." The congressman's daughter did not respond. She simply lifted one eyebrow, amused, and shifted her weight as if she expected someone to rush forward with a chair, or applause, or a curated moment of deference. Instead, the clerk read the case number. The sound echoed sharply, breaking whatever invisible show she thought she was starring in. The plaintiff raised her eyes for the first time, meeting Judge Judy's gaze, then quickly looking away. Her breath hitched, small and quiet, almost lost under the shuffle of papers from the bailiff's desk. But Judy noticed. She always noticed the quiet ones, the ones who came seeking justice rather than attention. When the defendant finally stepped toward the podium, it was with theatrical reluctance, as if every inch she moved was charity. She flipped her hair back over her shoulder, studying the plaintiff with a faint smirk. "This is ridiculous," she said. "I should not even be here." Judge Judy's head tilted barely, but enough to slice through the room like a warning. "You are here," she replied. "So let us find out why." The congressman's daughter opened her mouth again, ready to explain, ready to dominate, ready to perform, but she had no idea that the smile she walked in with would be the last confident expression she allowed herself today. And as she placed her hand on the podium, Judge Judy leaned forward, the smallest movement, but one that made everyone else in the room sit up straighter. Sensing something beginning to break, she took her place at the podium with a sigh loud enough to echo. Her heels clicked against the wood as if the bench itself should thank her for standing near it. Her smile sharpened, turning the courtroom into her stage. The congressman's daughter rested one manicured hand on the podium, tapping her nail impatiently like she was waiting for a server to bring her a drink. Her eyes swept the room with the confidence of someone raised to expect applause, not accountability. She flicked her hair back once, then again, each movement practiced, designed, intentional. Judge Judy watched without reacting, still, unmoved. "This whole thing is absurd," the defendant said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "It is a bakery. A small one. I barely touched anything." Her tone carried an edge, the edge of a person who believed inconvenience was an insult. The plaintiff stood silently beside her podium, clutching her folder. Her hands pressed against the paper as if trying to keep her fear contained. She opened her mouth to speak, then hesitated, her shoulders tightening as the defendant's dismissive laugh drifted across the room. Judge Judy turned her attention to the defendant. "Let us start with your version of events," she said. "Tell me what happened." The defendant sighed again, louder, slower, theatrical. "Fine," she said. "I went into her bakery. I wanted a custom cake for an event. She refused to give me a discount, which was rude considering who my father is, and then she accused me of knocking something over. I was not even near the shelf. She gestured with both hands, as if clearing away an invisible accusation. She is exaggerating for attention. The plaintiff's breath caught. The pain flickered across her face, small, but visible. Your father's position has nothing to do with this, Judge Judy said calmly. The defendant scoffed. Maybe not to you. A ripple of reaction moved through the audience. Even the bailiff shifted his stance slightly, his expression tightening. The plaintiff lowered her head, as if trying to shrink from the defendant's confidence. Judge Judy leaned forward just an inch, the kind of inch that changes the temperature of a room. Do not misunderstand me, she said. You are in my courtroom. Your father is not. For the first time, the defendant's smile wavered. She recovered quickly, crossing her arms in a way meant to reclaim dominance. Look, she said, I do not want to be here. I have a full schedule. My time is valuable. I have events, meetings, people to see. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. Your time is no more valuable than hers, she said, pointing toward the plaintiff. And today, both of you are here because something happened. Something we will discuss honestly. The defendant's jaw tightened a crack, small but real, in the glossy armor she arrived with. And just as she opened her mouth to push back again, the courtroom door clicked shut behind someone, entering a sound that pulled every eye toward the back, shifting the energy in a single heartbeat. A single folder landed on Judge Judy's desk with a soft thud. The sound was quiet, but it cut through the courtroom like a blade. The defendant's smile froze mid-curve. Judge Judy did not look at the folder at first. She let it rest there, the way a truth rests before it decides to speak. The plaintiff held her breath, waiting for the judge to open it. Her hands remained folded in front of her, stiff, almost unmoving, as if the entire case depended on her not trembling. Finally, Judy opened the folder. The papers inside rustled like whispers, the kind of whispers that usually end arguments before they begin. She flipped one page, then another, her eyes scanning quickly, efficiently. A faint hum rose from the audience, the kind that happens when everyone senses a shift but cannot name it yet. The congressman's daughter leaned in. Those are fake, she said suddenly, loudly. Whatever she brought, it is all edited. Anyone can Photoshop things now. Judge Judy kept reading. The defendant's voice rose another octave. I am serious. She probably downloaded pictures from the internet. This whole thing is a setup. Judy looked up, her gaze sharp enough to silence the room. I have not said a word yet, she replied. You are interrupting yourself. The defendant blinked, thrown off by the calm force in the judge's tone. The plaintiff stepped forward quietly, placing one more photo on the bench. Her fingers brushed the wood before she pulled back, as if touching the bench felt like touching the truth itself. The photo was simple. A wooden shelf collapsed under the weight of shattered ceramics. A single shadow the defendant stretched across the floor. Judge Judy studied it. Then she asked the defendant one clear, direct question. Are you telling me you were never near this shelf? The defendant laughed sharp, hollow, defensive. Obviously not, I told you. Judy raised one hand. Silence fell instantly. She flipped the page in the folder again. Her eyes paused on a printed receipt, then lifted to meet the plaintiff's. You included a timestamp, she said quietly, and a witness statement. The defendant rolled her eyes. Witnesses lie. They love attention. Judy turned her attention back to the folder, tapping one finger against the timestamp. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm that made the room tense. This timestamp, she said, is not from the plaintiff. It is from the store's security system. The defendant's face stilled. Judy continued. And it shows you walking directly toward that shelf less than 30 seconds before it collapsed. A wave of murmurs spread across the courtroom. The defendant's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her smile, the one she wore like armor, flickered, and as Judge Judy lifted the next photo from the folder, her expression changed just enough to make the defendant step back, as if she suddenly sensed the truth she had tried to outrun was finally catching up. Judge Judy did not lift her eyes at first. She just held the photo in her hand, perfectly still. Stillness is dangerous in her courtroom. The silence stretched long enough for the defendant's confidence to curdle. She shifted her weight, crossing her arms, then uncrossing them, then placing a hand on her hip as if rearranging her posture might rearrange the truth. Judge Judy finally looked up. "What time?" she asked. "Did you say you left the bakery?" The defendant blinked. "I already told you. I left at 4:20. I had an event at 5. I could not have been there any later." Judy nodded slowly, almost kindly. 4:20. She turned the photo toward the audience, then toward the defendant. "This image," she said, "was captured at 4:42. A shockwave of murmurs rippled through the room. The plaintiff's breath hitched, just barely, but she did not speak. She just lowered her gaze, as if afraid to break the fragile silence, holding the truth in place. The defendant's smile tightened unnaturally at the corners. "That must be wrong," she said. "Maybe her system clock is off. Maybe her staff messed something up. They are always messing up." Judy lifted an eyebrow. The warning eyebrow. "The timestamp," she said, "is linked to a cloud-based security server. It does not drift. It does not guess. It does not lie." The defendant swallowed, her throat moving visibly, like the truth was physically stuck there. "And," Judy added, tapping the photo once, "the person in the picture is wearing the same jacket you are wearing today." The defendant's breath caught. She looked down at her blazer, the same pale lavender fabric now glowing under the courtroom lights like a spotlight she could not escape. She tried to speak, but her lips parted without sound. Judge Judy opened the folder again, flipping to a page the plaintiff had not mentioned a witness statement signed by one of the bakery employees. The paper trembled slightly at the edges as Judy held it up. "You did not mention," Judy said to the plaintiff, "that there were 2 witnesses." The plaintiff blinked, surprised. I only brought the one statement." The other employee was not sure she wanted to be involved. "She was," Judy replied calmly. "She sent her statement directly to the court this morning." The defendant's head snapped toward the plaintiff. "You told her to do that? You are manipulating people now?" "No," Judge Judy cut in, her tone flat. "People often tell the truth when they think no one is looking." The defendant stood frozen, a statue cracking from the inside. "And this witness," Judy continued, "states that you argued with her about paying for damages after the shelf fell. That was it. The shift. The break." Her illusion of control shattered with the same quiet violence as the ceramics in the photo. And as Judge Judy slid the witness statement across the bench, she said one line that made the defendant step back as if burned. "Now we can begin telling the truth." Her breath hitched just once, but in a room this quiet, once was enough. Privilege sounds different when it starts to panic. It goes from loud to brittle. The congressman's daughter straightened her blazer, lifting her chin as if she could physically push herself back into control. But control has a particular posture, and she no longer had it. Her eyes flicked between the witness statement, the plaintiff, and Judge Judy, searching for a crack she could slip through, a mistake she could exploit. There was none. She cleared her throat. "This is ridiculous," she said, but the sentence lacked its earlier confidence. It sounded like someone reading lines they no longer believed in. Judge Judy did not react. She simply folded her hands, the gesture slow and deliberate, signaling she was in no hurry. That was far more frightening than anger. "You said," Judy began, "that you left at 4:20. There is evidence placing you at 4:42. There is a witness who says you argued about the damages after they happened." The defendant's foot tapped against the floor fast, anxious, betraying her. "I was upset," she snapped. "Anyone would be. They all knew who I was. They were being dramatic on purpose. People do that around important families." The audience murmured, a low ripple of shock and disbelief. Judge Judy's voice remained steady. "Important families," she repeated, as if tasting the words. "Is that your explanation?" "It is the truth," the defendant said sharply. "People exaggerate when politicians are involved. They want attention. They want drama. She probably loved the idea of this blowing up online." The plaintiff lifted her head in surprise, her eyes wide hurt, not angry. Judge Judy leaned back slightly. "You believe this is happening to you," she said. "Not because of your actions, but because of who your father is." The defendant nodded quickly, too quickly. "Exactly. That is interesting," Judy said. "Because until this moment, your father's name has been spoken only by you." The defendant blinked, her lips parting. For the first time, she looked confused. Judy continued. "The plaintiff never mentioned him. The witnesses never mentioned him. The only person who believes your father is on trial is you." The defendant's jaw tightened. "You do not get it. The press, there is no press here," Judy interrupted softly. "Only accountability." The defendant's breathing quickened. She turned abruptly toward the plaintiff. "You did this," she hissed. "You sent my name to someone. You wanted people to know who I am." The plaintiff flinched. "I did not," she whispered. "I just wanted you to pay for what you broke." That simple sentence hit harder than anything else that morning. The defendant looked back at Judge Judy, eyes widening as the room seemed to close in around her. The spotlight she thought she controlled now burned too bright, too revealing. Her voice cracked. "You are all twisting this." "No," Judy said calmly. "The only person twisting anything is you." And just as the defendant opened her mouth to retaliate, the bailiff stepped forward, one quiet, steady step turning every head as the tension in the room shifted again, sharp as a snapped thread. She pointed at the judge. No one points at Judge Judy. The air itself recoiled. Her finger hovered in the space between them like a spark thrown in a dry forest, small, reckless, enough to start a fire she could not control. The defendant's chest rose and fell too quickly, breath sharp with frustration she no longer knew how to hide. Her voice, once smooth and practiced, now cracked like a glass under pressure. "You are being unfair," she said loudly, her words slicing through the room. "You are not listening to me. You are taking her side because she is crying and I am not." The plaintiff froze at the accusation. She was not crying, she was holding everything in with the kind of strength quiet people use when they have been dismissed too many times. Judge Judy did not move at first. Stillness. Again. That dangerous kind. "Put your hand down," Judy said finally, her voice low enough to force every person in the room to lean in. The defendant's arm wavered but did not drop. Instead, she doubled down. "You think you can talk to me like that? You are supposed to be." The bailiff took one step forward. That single step shifted the atmosphere like a sudden gust of wind through a still room. The defendant's words faltered mid-breath. She saw the bailiff's steady posture, the controlled readiness in his stance, not aggressive, just firm, like a wall that did not care who her father was. Judge Judy rose from her seat, not quickly, not angrily, slowly, deliberately, a movement that carried more authority than any raised voice ever could. The defendant stumbled back 1 inch. "One," Judy said, raising a finger. "You do not point at me." Her second finger rose. 2. "You do not raise your voice at me." A third. 3. "You do not accuse this courtroom of bias because the truth disagrees with you." The defendant swallowed hard. Her bravado was slipping like makeup in heat. I was just," she stuttered. Judy cut her off with a glance. "You were just digging the hole deeper." The plaintiff, gathering her courage, stepped forward and placed the final photo on the bench, the photo she had saved for the moment when truth mattered more than fear. The image showed the defendant standing directly in front of the damaged shelf, hand outstretched, caught in the instant before impact. The room gasped. The defendant's face drained of color. "That is edited," she shouted, a pitch too high, too frantic. "It is from a live security feed," the plaintiff said softly. "I asked the employee to send a still frame." The defendant slammed her palm against the podium, the sound cracking through the courtroom like a warning. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "Stop." That one word froze her completely. And then, like a final match thrown on gasoline, the defendant whispered, "This is harassment." Judy leaned in, her voice dropping to a quiet, devastating calm. "If you think this is harassment," she said, "you are seconds away from learning what real consequences look like." Her breathing changed. Shallow, uneven, ragged. Anger disguises fear only for so long. And in that moment, her fear finally made a sound. The defendant stood rigid at the podium, chest rising too quickly, eyes darting from the judge to the plaintiff to the bailiff, as if calculating invisible exits. But there were no exits here, only consequences, circling closer with every truth she tried to outrun. She gripped the edge of the podium, knuckles white against polished wood. "I am being targeted," she said, her voice trembling beneath the forced sharpness. "You all know it. You are all pretending not to see what is happening." Judge Judy remained seated now, but her presence filled the space like a weight settling onto the room. "What I see," she said calmly, "is someone who refuses to take responsibility." "You are twisting everything," the defendant snapped. "You are all twisting it. I did nothing wrong, and you are making me look like a criminal." Judy's tone did not rise. It deepened. "This is a civil case. No one is calling you a criminal." But the defendant was not listening. Panic rarely listens. She took a step back from the podium, as if distance could undo evidence. Then she turned abruptly toward the courtroom door. "I am leaving," she said. "I do not feel safe here." The words sounded rehearsed, like something she had told herself while spiraling internally, but the delivery cracked in the middle, exposing her fear. The bailiff stepped forward, not aggressively, just enough to block her path. His body was a wall, calm, steady, immovable. "You need to remain inside the courtroom, ma'am," he said quietly. The defendant froze, her throat tightening. She looked from the bailiff's unblinking stare to the judge's calm face. "You cannot keep me here," she whispered. "You came willingly," Judy replied, "and you will stay until this case is resolved." The plaintiff watched from her podium, hands clasped together tightly. She did not speak, but her eyes traced the defendant's unraveling with an expression caught between fear and relief. The victim had lived behind this woman's shadow once she did not want to be pulled back into it. "You all think you can trap me," the defendant said, voice cracking in a way she tried to hide with a cough. "You think you can embarrass me because of who my father is." "No," Judy said softly. "You are embarrassing yourself." The defendant's breath hitched. A tremor traveled through her hands. "I am calling someone," she whispered, almost to herself. She reached for her purse. The audience stiffened. The plaintiff stiffened. Even the bailiff leaned forward. Judge Judy watched with that razor-sharp stillness, the kind that meant she already knew what was coming, and she already knew it would be bad. The defendant's fingers closed around her phone. Desperation flickered across her face like lightning before a storm. And as she lifted the phone slowly, defiantly, Judge Judy narrowed her eyes, sensing the moment the entire case was about to explode. She lifted the phone like it was her last lifeline. 3 taps, slow and deliberate. 9. 1. 1. The sound of her fingertip against the screen seemed louder than footsteps, louder than whispers, louder than the truth itself. The entire courtroom froze, even the lights felt still. The defendant held the phone to her ear, chin raised, shoulders squared, reclaiming the confidence she had been losing piece by piece. But confidence built on panic is fragile, and everyone could see the cracks. The line began to ring. Judge Judy's gaze did not waver. She stood completely still, watching a young woman walk herself into a disaster with the certainty of someone who had never been stopped before. "I am calling to report an emergency," the defendant announced loudly, projecting her voice to make sure everyone heard. "I am being illegally detained inside Judge Judy's courtroom. They are refusing to let me leave. I feel unsafe." Murmurs rippled through the audience, disbelief, shock, something close to fear. The dispatcher answered. 911, what is your emergency? The defendant inhaled sharply, switching into a rehearsed tone, the polished, political cadence of someone who grew up around microphones instead of boundaries. "Yes," she said, "I am the daughter of Congressman Tyler Anderson. I am being held against my will by Judge Judy and her staff. I need immediate assistance." Judge Judy stepped forward, not quickly, not loudly, just enough for the room to feel colder. "This is Judge Judith Scheindlin," she said, her voice calm enough to slice cleanly through panic. "We have a caller attempting to file a false emergency report." The defendant spun toward her, eyes wide. "You cannot," but she could. The dispatcher's tone shifted instantly sharper, more alert. "Ma'am, are you in danger?" Judge Judy answered. "Not the defendant. No. She is in a lawful courtroom proceeding. She is free to leave once her case is concluded. She is not under arrest. She is not under threat. She is attempting to misuse emergency services." The defendant's face drained of color. "Wait, no, she is twisting it," she stammered. The bailiff stepped closer, voice steady. "Ma'am, making a false report to emergency services is a crime." There it was. The defendant's grip on the phone loosened. Her breath hitched. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid, not of Judge Judy, not of the plaintiff, but of something bigger. Accountability that could not be dodged by last name or loudness. The dispatcher's voice returned, colder than before. "Ma'am, unless you are in immediate danger, this call should not continue. Do you understand the legal repercussions of a false report?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Judge Judy folded her arms. "Hang up," she said softly. "Now." The defendant lowered the phone with trembling fingers. The screen dimmed as the call ended, the silence thick and merciless. And as she placed the phone on the podium, her entire body trembled, a storm about to break, while Judge Judy simply said, "You just made this far more serious than you ever imagined." The call ended, but the fallout did not. Silence wrapped around the courtroom like a cold hand. And in that silence, she finally understood fear. The defendant's phone slipped slightly in her grip before she set it down, screen face down, like she was ashamed to let anyone see it. Her shoulders curled inward, no longer pulled back in practiced confidence. She stared at her hands, blinking too fast, realizing the gravity of what she had just done, not in front of her father, not in front of campaign donors, not in front of staffers trained to clean up messes. This time, she stood alone. Judge Judy gestured calmly to the bailiff. "Leave the line open," she said. "Keep the record of the call active." The defendant's head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. "Wait, no, why?" I hung up. "It is over." Judy shook her head slowly. Panic does not erase evidence. Even the bailiff seemed affected by the quiet severity of her tone. He picked up the courtroom phone, calling the dispatcher back to clarify that the report would be documented. His voice remained steady, but the words carried weight. "False emergency call. Courtroom. Caller. Identified." Each phrase hit the defendant like a physical impact. She took a step backward, bumping into the podium. "I did not lie," she said, breath trembling. "I felt unsafe. I was overwhelmed. You all were. You felt cornered by truth," Judy said. "That is not the same as danger." The plaintiff watched silently, her eyes softening not out of pity but out of recognition. Fear had lived in her bakery for weeks after the incident, and now she was watching the source of that fear unravel in the same way. The defendant shook her head rapidly. "No, you are twisting everything again. I did not mean to cause trouble. I was scared. I did not know what else to do. You cannot charge me for a mistake." Judy folded her hands. "A mistake is dropping your phone. A mistake is forgetting a receipt. You made a choice." The defendant's breath caught in her throat. "My father will." "Your father," Judy said sharply, "has nothing to do with this courtroom." Her tone was not loud. It did not need to be. It landed harder than any raised voice ever could. For the first time, the defendant looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally, the way a shadow shrinks when a light turns on. Her eyes glistened with a panic she could no longer hide. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, unable to form the lie she needed to feel safe. "This will follow you," Judy added quietly. "Not because I am harsh, because actions have weight." The defendant's voice cracked on the next breath. I did not think it would go this far." "It always goes far," Judy replied. "When someone believes they are untouchable." The bailiff returned to his post. The courtroom settled into a heavy, suffocating stillness. And just when the room thought the consequences had fully landed, The defendant's phone vibrated violently against the podium, one message flashing across the screen that drained the last hint of color from her face. The vibration echoed like a warning bell. One message, one line of text, and whatever confidence she had left disappeared. The defendant stared at the glowing screen as if it were a verdict. Her hand hovered above it, trembling, unsure whether to silence it or throw it across the room. But the message had already done its damage. Her face drained, her breath hitched, and the illusion of control slipped through her fingers like sand. Judge Judy watched her with a steady, unblinking gaze. "You can read it," she said. "It will not change the truth." The defendant swallowed hard and flipped the phone over. Everyone saw a glimpse of the screen's brightness before she lowered it close to her chest, but she could not hide the way her knees wobbled, or the way her voice cracked when she breathed out. It is nothing," she whispered. "Just someone checking in." Judy's stare sharpened. Someone? Or something? A brittle silence settled in, the kind that exposes more than words ever could. The plaintiff stepped forward slightly, concern flickering in her eyes, not pity, just cautious humanity. Judy caught the movement and nodded almost imperceptibly, granting the moment space. Then the judge opened the folder again. "Let us return to the facts," Judy said. Each word fell like a stepping stone, leading her deeper into consequences she could not avoid. She began laying out receipts, timestamps, photos, each piece placed with surgical precision. The defendant's eyes darted from document to document, her composure collapsing with every page turn. "You lied about the time," Judy said. "You lied about where you stood, and you lied about feeling threatened." The defendant's hands trembled visibly now, nails clicking softly against the podium. I did not mean to lie," she stuttered. "I was overwhelmed. I was trying to explain. The cameras, the statements, I felt like everyone was twisting what happened." "No," Judy replied. "Everyone is simply seeing it clearly for the first time." A small, wounded sound escaped the defendant's throat, something between a breath and a sob she tried to swallow. She pressed her palm against the podium to steady herself, but it only made her shaking more obvious. The plaintiff unclasped her hands, letting them rest at her sides. She looked at the defendant with an expression caught between caution and compassion. She knew what unraveling felt like. She had lived with the fear this woman caused. Judy shifted her gaze to the plaintiff. "Tell me again," she said softly. "What happened after the shelf fell?" The plaintiff's voice was quiet but steady. "She got angry. She said she would make sure we regretted it. She said her father would—" "Stop," the defendant choked out. "Stop bringing him into this." Judy tilted her head. "You brought him into it first." The defendant's eyes filled, shimmering under the harsh lights. Her mascara clung to the edges of her lashes like it, too, was trying not to fall apart. Her shoulders slumped, her voice thinned, her pride wavered. I did not want to look wrong," she whispered. "I did not want anyone to think I was like this." The courtroom fell painfully still. For the first time, she sounded human, and as she lowered her head, a quiet confession forming on her lips, Judge Judy leaned forward, sensing the moment the real truth was about to break open. Her lips trembled, finally ready to tell the truth. But truth has weight, and when she opened her mouth, it did not come out clean. It came out broken. The defendant's hands gripped the podium so tightly her knuckles blanched. The courtroom waited, still and heavy, as if the very air was bracing for a confession that had been clawing its way out from behind her arrogance since the moment she walked in. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice soft but razor-sharp. "What were you really doing in that bakery?" A pause. A long one. The kind that reshapes the room. The defendant swallowed, eyes darting to the plaintiff, then back to the floor. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked in the middle. I was not there for a cake." The audience stirred, a wave of quiet shock. The plaintiff's eyes widened, breath catching as she processed the implication. Judy did not blink. "Then why were you there?" The defendant lifted her gaze slowly, fear, shame, and something painfully vulnerable flickering behind it. "Because an employee posted something online about my father. Something ugly. something people were sharing. She inhaled shakily. He told me to ignore it. I could not. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I went there to confront her. The courtroom rippled with disbelief. The plaintiff's breath stilled, her body stiffening as she remembered the way the defendant had marched in that day, angry, entitled, unpredictable. Judge Judy's eyes hardened, but her voice remained calm. You confronted her? About a personal matter? Inside a place of business? The defendant nodded, eyes flooding. I thought if I showed her who she was dealing with, she would delete it. I thought it would fix everything. I thought I could protect him. Her voice fractured again. My father says he does not care what people say. But I do. Because they blame him for everything. They blame us. Her chest heaved with each shaky breath. The room had never heard her speak without armor until now. I was desperate, she confessed. I was tired of people hating us. I was tired of comments, threats, memes, everything. I just wanted it to stop. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, mascara smearing like a bruise. And when things fell off the shelf, I panicked. I thought if I admitted it, it would make him look weak. So I lied. And I kept lying. The plaintiff softened, just slightly recognizing pain when she saw it, even behind privilege. Judge Judy exhaled slowly. A measured breath that carried authority and understanding. Your father is not on trial here, she said. But you have been punishing this young woman for the pressure you feel at home. The defendant blinked rapidly, unable to deny it. And you attempted to weaponize a 911 call, Judy added. Not because you were unsafe, but because you were drowning in guilt. A single tear slid down the defendant's cheek. She did not brush it away. The audience sat mesmerized, processing the unexpected shift, the emotional twist that reframed everything they had witnessed. I did not mean to hurt anyone, the defendant whispered. I just did not want to feel powerless. Judge Judy nodded once. Feeling powerless does not give you the right to take power from others. The defendant lowered her head. For the first time, she looked like someone ready to listen, and as the weight of her confession settled into the room, Judge Judy tapped her gavel gently and said, Now we deal with the damage you caused, both the visible and the hidden. The confession still hung in the air like dust after an explosion. No one moved. No one breathed. It was the quiet after something breaks. The defendant stood at the podium, shoulders curved inward, mascara smudged at the corners of her eyes. She looked less like the powerful congressman's daughter and more like a young woman who had finally run out of ways to hide. Her fingers trembled as they rested against the polished wood, but she did not pull them back. She did not try to rebuild the armor she had worn since the moment she entered the courtroom. Judge Judy watched her with a steady, unreadable expression, not cold, not cruel, just grounded. There is a strange stillness that follows truth, and Judy knew that no ruling should ever come before the room has fully felt its weight. Take a breath, she said quietly. The defendant did a small, shaky inhale that seemed to surprise even her. She wiped her cheeks again, slower now, the frantic panic replaced by something softer. Fatigue, maybe, or recognition. The plaintiff stepped forward, clutching the edges of her apron like someone gathering courage. Her voice wavered when she spoke, but only at the start. You scared my staff, she said, not because of your father, not because of politics, but because you came in angry and loud, and they did not know what you would do. The defendant lowered her gaze, her expression crumpling. I did not mean, she began. I know, the plaintiff said gently, but it happened anyway. The courtroom fell back into silence. A different kind this time, not tense, not electric, just heavy. Human. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, allowing a moment for both women to breathe. For the first time, she saw the defendant not as an entitled aggressor, but as someone crushed under expectations she could not meet and emotions she did not understand. But empathy is not the same as absolution, and her expression made that clear. You acted out of fear, Judy said. Fear for your father, fear of judgment, fear of losing control. She tapped the folder lightly. But fear does not erase harm, it does not repair damage. The defendant nodded slowly, tears clinging to her lashes. "I know. And the bakery owner," Judy continued, "has been living with the consequences of your fear for weeks." The plaintiff's voice trembled again, not out of weakness, but out of relief at finally being heard. "I just wanted an apology," she said softly. "And for you to understand what you did." The defendant exhaled shakily. "I do. I really do." For a moment, the courtroom seemed suspended between two worlds, the damage done and the healing yet to come. Judge Judy closed the folder, the sound crisp and final. "Understanding is a start," she said. "But accountability requires more." The defendant straightened slightly, bracing herself. The storm had passed, but the aftermath still needed to be faced. And as Judy leaned forward, preparing to outline what must come next, a sudden knock on the courtroom door snapped every head toward the sound, cutting through the calm like a new threat rising in the quiet. The knock faded, but its echo remained. Sudden sounds do that in a quiet room. They remind everyone that peace is fragile. The bailiff cracked the door, murmured a brief exchange, then closed it again with a soft click. No danger, no reporters, just a clerk delivering paperwork. But the momentary ripple had already settled into the defendant's nerves, heightening the fragility she was barely holding together. Judge Judy waited until all eyes returned to the bench. Then she folded her hands on the desk, posture calm but unmistakably firm. "We are going to continue," she said, "because truth does not stop for interruptions." The defendant nodded, though her chin trembled. She inhaled shakily, wiping the remnants of tears off her cheeks. Her voice came out thin, scraped raw by the last few minutes. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "I really did not want to hurt anyone." Judy tilted her head. "But you did." The defendant winced at the words, as if they had weight, and they did. They always did when spoken plainly. The plaintiff clasped her hands in front of her, the gesture protective but no longer fearful. She had watched the defendant unravel, confess, and soften. Now, she watched someone attempt to rebuild herself in real time. The defendant's eyes flicked toward her. "I am sorry," she said. The apology was uneven, as if unfamiliar in her mouth. "I know that sounds small compared to everything that happened, but I mean it." The plaintiff nodded once, genuine, restrained, unsure. Judge Judy leaned forward, elbows gently resting on the bench. "You apologized because you were caught," she said, "but also because you realized the truth inside the panic. That is a start." The defendant swallowed hard. "I have always been told to hold my ground, never admit fault, never let anything make us look weak." Her voice broke again. "I thought if I apologized, it would make everything worse." "Apologies," Judy said, "are not weakness. They are responsibility." The defendant's shoulders slumped, the fight finally drained out of them. She stared at her hands, twisting them together, the gesture almost childlike. "I have never felt this ashamed," she whispered. "Not ever." "It is not shame," Judy corrected softly. "It is awareness, and it is long overdue." A quiet murmur spread across the courtroom agreement, mixed with empathy. Even the defendant seemed surprised by how much relief washed over her at those words, as if awareness was something she had craved without recognizing it. The plaintiff released a slow breath. "I do not want your life ruined," she said gently. "I just wanted the truth." The defendant's eyes shimmered again. "I know." Judge Judy nodded. "Good. Because understanding the harm is the first step. The next step is repairing it." The defendant straightened not confidently, but with intent. A small flicker of resolve replaced the panic. What do I need to do?" she asked. It was not defiance. It was surrender to the truth. Judy opened the folder once more, ready to outline the beginning of consequences, real ones, not imagined or avoided. But before she spoke, the plaintiff raised a hesitant hand, surprising the courtroom, and stopping the judge mid-sentence with a request no one expected. Her raised hand hovered in the still air. A small gesture, but powerful enough to pause a courtroom. Even Judge Judy waited. The plaintiff's voice trembled when she finally spoke, but her words carried an unexpected steadiness. "Judge, before you decide anything, I want to say something." She looked at the defendant, not with bitterness or fear, but with the quiet intensity of someone choosing courage over anger. The defendant lifted her eyes, startled. She wiped her cheeks quickly, embarrassed by the vulnerability still clinging to her face. "You want to talk to me?" she whispered. "I want to understand," the plaintiff said softly. "You said you felt pressure, that people online were attacking your father. But you came into my bakery so angry, so forceful. Why me?" The defendant swallowed hard, her voice thin. "Because you were the closest person to the post. You worked with the employee who wrote it, and when I got there, seeing you behind the counter..." She shook her head, shame tugging at her features. "I projected everything onto you. I was angry, and you were just there." The plaintiff blinked, the truth settling over her like a weight she had not expected. "I never wanted to be part of your family's problems. I just run a bakery." A fragile silence followed two young women facing the messy intersection of fear, privilege, and unintended consequences. Judge Judy allowed the moment to breathe. The light above the bench glowed softly, casting long shadows that stretched across the polished floor, as if pulling the past toward a place where it could no longer hide. The defendant spoke again, quieter this time. "Every time something happens online or in the news, people assume I am just like him. The comments get ugly. The threats get worse." Her voice cracked. "I wanted to feel powerful for once. I wanted someone to listen to me. And instead," Judy said gently, "you hurt someone who had nothing to do with the pain you were carrying." The defendant nodded, tears rising again. "I know." The plaintiff exhaled slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not want revenge. I never did. I just wanted the truth to matter." Judge Judy leaned back, observing both women, the victim grounded in quiet dignity, the defendant fragile in her awakening, the room suspended in a rare moment of shared humanity. "This," Judy said softly, "is what reflection looks like. Not excuses, not deflection. Understanding." She closed the folder with deliberate calm. The sound echoed like the closing of a chapter. "In this courtroom," she continued, "accountability is not about humiliation. It is about recognition. And the weight of admission," she glanced at the defendant, "must be followed by the weight of consequence." The defendant braced herself, shoulders rising with one last trembling breath. The plaintiff looked down, bracing for closure, whatever form it took. The entire courtroom leaned forward, and just as Judge Judy lifted her gavel to deliver her verdict, the defendant whispered, barely audible, "Whatever you decide, I will accept it." A quiet declaration, unexpected, unguarded, that changed the room's temperature one last time. Before hearing the final verdict, do you believe true accountability can come from remorse alone, or must consequences always follow? The gavel hovered mid-air, not yet striking, but already shaping the future. Every heartbeat in the room slowed to match its rhythm. Judge Judy lowered her hand gently, placing the gavel back on the bench rather than striking it. A different choice, a deliberate one. She looked first at the plaintiff, then at the defendant, and finally at the space between them, the invisible line of harm, fear, privilege, and humanity that the courtroom had dragged into the open. "Both of you," she said softly, "have stood here exposed, one in courage, one in consequence." The defendant wiped her cheeks again, but this time she did not hide from the gesture. She stood with her shoulders forward, not in defiance, but in acceptance. Judge Judy began her ruling. First, to the plaintiff, you are owed compensation for the damages to your property, the cost of repairs, the loss of inventory, and the disruption to your business will be fully covered by the defendant. The plaintiff nodded, relief washing through her features, not triumphant, not vindictive, just released. Judy continued. Second, I am ordering the defendant to write a formal apology not crafted by advisors, not filtered by political handlers, but in her own words. You will deliver it in writing and in person. The defendant's throat tightened, but she nodded firmly. Yes, I understand. But there is more. Judy's voice deepened. What happened here today goes beyond a broken shelf. It involved a misuse of emergency services, an attempt to manipulate the truth, and an emotional outburst that put others at risk. The defendant's eyes glistened again, but she did not look away. For that reason, the attempted 911 misuse will be formally documented and referred to the proper authorities. Her tone stayed composed, compassionate, firm. You will face that consequence as part of understanding the impact of your actions. The defendant inhaled shakily. I know. And I will. Judge Judy softened, but only slightly. Good. Because accountability without acceptance is hollow. You are learning acceptance. Now you must honor it. A stillness settled over the room. Not tension, not fear. A solemn, necessary calm. Then the judge turned to the plaintiff. And you, she said gently, showed remarkable restraint and integrity. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet persistence. You embodied that. The plaintiff's eyes warmed with gratitude. Finally, Judy straightened her posture and lifted the gavel once more. The defendant looked down. The plaintiff stood tall. The courtroom held its breath. Let today remind everyone, Judy said, that power is not a shield. Truth is not optional. And arrogance, she glanced at the defendant with a steady, human gaze, always collapses under the weight of its own echo. Sharp, clean, final. The room exhaled. The defendant closed her eyes, letting the verdict settle into her bones. The plaintiff reached for her folder, feeling her world finally steady, and Judge Judy, composed and resolute, watched the truth ripple outward as justice, at last, took its rightful place.